Hi, counselors. Good to see everybody.
Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
Hey, Paul,
Right,
thanks again for hosting.
not a problem at all. It's always so weird doing on Zoom something we've done in person in the past where, I would have been gotten on the road an hour ago, made sure to stop at Starbucks and, we'd be hanging out. Instead, like I, kissed my kids goodbye 1 minute ago. But thank you guys for having me. We'll give folks another minute or two to drift in, and then we'll start the party. And by party, I mean admissions discussion, the opposite of a party. Let me also share with you all the handout that we're going to be going over. I think I'll share this screen. That'll be a little better. Navigate there. For those looking for it, on our website, pjtestprep.com, there is a optimizing admissions handout. And this is what we're going to be going over today. It's not critical that you download this now or anything, but you might want to just grab it in case you want notes on today's presentation. I'm going to paste the direct link, but if you happen to be on pjtestprep.com, it's right here, and it looks like this. I'm going to put that in the chat if anybody feels like grabbing it at any point. Obviously, that's up to you. We'll be covering all of it. I'll be talking through it, but in case you're like, I want that sweet graph. Look how sweet that thing is. Oh, wait, sorry, man, I sent that to just you. Let's send that to everyone. Handout today. That's better. No more than one person can have it. All right, so let me pop this up here. Yeah, it's like that. All right, well, we are at 8:32 and I'm having to scroll onto multiple screens for the Zoom, which is a great sign. Let's get started. Counselors,
Okay.
did you guys want to have any intro stuff to cover or any logistics that you got to run by everybody or anything before we go?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to welcome all the parents who are joining us today. I am Leanne Lau. I'm a school counselor here at West High School. I have students with the last names FI through LA. And I'm going to have the other counselors introduce themselves in a little bit, but I just wanted to give a brief introduction for those who are just joining us. We have Paul Jury here, and he is with PJ Test Prep. He will be doing our session today, and he is a dear friend and partner with West High School. We've used his services in the local South Bay community for the past quite a few years now, actually. And so we love inviting Paul here. He's a wealth of knowledge, and we hope that you guys will get a lot out of what he has to share today. It is quite a different landscape now with COVID, with college admissions, and we felt that this was something that parents and students would like to learn about. And so that's why we invited Paul to join us. For those, again, that are just joining us, we are recording this session. We will make it available on our West High website, so you can always revisit that if you would like. If you have friends that weren't able to join, they will be able to access that as well. Okay, thank you so much for joining us.
Perfect. And thank you guys so much for having me. Obviously, it is a crazy time, and I always appreciate working with West families. So I'm hoping I can make this as useful to you guys as possible. Before I even really start, let me just make sure I'm orienting this in the right direction. I want to know the years of you guys as students. Can you guys just give me a quick thumbs up if you have a senior right now, if you've got somebody right in the middle of the application process who's probably freaking out right now? maybe not many people because they're busy working on their college essays. We've got a few. Who's got a junior this year who's just starting to think about this kind of stuff, but it's not urgent yet, but certainly there are some schedules you might want to make. All right, do we have sophomores? Anybody representing 10th graders? Okay, cool. Some more sophomores and freshmen, anybody? People way ahead of the curve. Although with something
Yes.
like college admissions, I don't want to like stress anybody out because you don't have to like be worried about this now, but it's never too early to start thinking about this kind of stuff and the plan you might take. Okay, we've got a nice mixture here. So what we're going to cover today, regardless, is going to be hopefully stuff that will help everybody. For those of you who are seniors, there are things you'll want to be working on right now. There's also things that there's not that much you can do about at this point, like your grades. I mean, obviously, don't get a bunch of D's your senior year, but you're not going to change your GPA that much. There are other things you'll want to really be thinking about, like the essays and so forth right now. With freshmen, you don't have to worry about your college essays really just yet. You don't have to worry about SATs, ACTs. Some of you may never have to worry about those. But you might be thinking about the kind of classes you take and stuff like that. So I'll try to orient it to everybody. Guys, I'm Paul Jury. I am founder of PJ Test Prep. We're a local boutique SAT, ACT, and tutoring company based here in South Bay. I got into this game about, 15, 20 years ago almost at this point, because I'm a giant test nerd and I love helping people how to understand silly tests like the SAT and the ACT. I also spend half my time doing writing, not only with helping coach college application essays, but occasionally write for TV shows and finishing up my second book and stuff right now. So I like to think that the college essay part of it, at least, is like the exact Venn diagram of the two things I spend all my time on, which is getting kids into colleges and creative writing. And so there's this little sliver in the middle that's this. Also, I wouldn't call myself a admissions like coaching expert. There are people who can tell you the name of all 1,400 colleges out there and what their strengths and weaknesses are in every area. However, after 20 years of helping coach kids into college, I picked up a thing or two. Also, I've been watching all of the guru titans of the industries videos and presentations and stuff this fall about all of the stuff that has changed, most of which I knew already, but every once in a while I learn an extra little thing here going on. So I'm hoping to convey as much of that as possible today. I'm going to hopefully share some tips and tricks and hack optimizations for you guys as application procedures. I'll speak most about the things that I'm most expert in, the SAT, ACT, whether you should take that, when you should take it, which schools it's going to help with, whether it will help you and stuff like that. And of course the essays, which I know you seniors are focusing on right now, but juniors and younger can start thinking about what they might write about down the line, and perhaps even help shaping their college or their high school experience to manifest some of those ideas to come forward. Counselors, remind me, how much time do we have today? Is this half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour?
I would say at the most probably until 9:30, but
Okay, we'll keep
if
it shorter
parents
than
have
that.
to scoot, they can. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, if at any point you guys have to, go to like work or something, your actual job, feel free to do so. But I will try to keep things moving along here. All right, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. I assume you can all hear me fine still. And can you guys see this optimizing college admissions handout that we've got? Give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Thank you guys. I love on Zoom how you can ask for a thumbs up and you can actually get like, the digital yellow one, or you can get an actual thumb for those with their videos on. All right, guys. So today we're going to talk about optimizing college admissions, what's changed during this wacky pandemic time, what you guys can basically do about it to try to increase the probability that you're getting into as many schools as you want. So I'm going to just jump right in and talk a little bit about the place that we're at in terms of the college admissions picture. We're in sort of a weird, the whole country and world are in sort of a weird medium zone at this point. There is still a pandemic going on, but depending on where you are and what you're doing at the moment, you may or may not notice that. have been, I live here in Los Angeles, where we're still generally being very careful, although I'm happy to say that most schools are operating more or less normally with kids back in person. But we're still masking most places out and so forth. I spent 2 months this summer in Minnesota and New Jersey, and I don't think I saw a mask for like 2 months. And those aren't even the most anti-mask of the states. But we're getting a variety of kind of responses to it. And college's approach to admissions during this weird time is kind of similar to that. Some quick examples being that schools are, with the exception of the UCs and CSUs, starting to look at SATs and ACTs again, but very few places are requiring them, at least for this year's seniors. How much will that change next year and going forward? It's still tough to say. There have been a bunch of schools that said, you know what, we're going to just stay test optional for next year at least, for 2022 graduates and 2023 graduates. Other schools have made motions like they're going to go back to requiring them. It just kind of depends on the schools. As you guys know, the UCs will not even look at your SATs and ACTs, at least for now. We'll see if that changes, but right now their plan is to, phase these tests out. The CSUs, as usual, just do whatever the UCs are going to do. And so you won't need those scores right now. You can keep your ears on the news to see if any of that changes, but that sort of changed the calculus of what colleges care about. Now, this is obviously an oversimplified model. You'll hear some people talk about there being 9 or 10 different metrics that they look at when they're considering their applicants. But in general, this is sort of an oversimplified quadrant of what it used to look like for most schools and kind of what it looks like now. Grades have always been and remain the most important thing that schools are looking at. You guys know this already. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about grades because you already know that. So, this probably was always a bigger quadrant. And grades, of course, I don't just mean your GPA. It's the academic course load and how much you're challenging yourself. We'll talk more about that in a second, but that's always a huge deal. It's even more so a big deal during this time of SAT, ACT test blindness or test optionalness. College admissions, especially at large and selective schools, for instance, UCLA, really spiked this last year. Some colleges, out of state colleges, because obviously tons of people always applied to UCLA, but Colgate on the East Coast saw a doubling of their applications this past year. It's mostly because, although there's still the same number of kids, although there were a bunch of gap year folks who took a year off during the pandemic and then flooded the seats for this current year or the last year's graduates, which made things especially competitive for them. But when schools stop requiring the SAT, a student who had thought about applying to UCLA or NYU or Colgate or Stanford or something like that, but they only got an 1,000 on their PSAT, but they have a 4.0 GPA. They probably wouldn't have bothered to apply to Stanford in previous years. They wouldn't bother to apply to NYU or a really selective school like that. But now they can. Now they can just say, hey, I got a shot now because there's no SAT score. That was my weak area. Now that's not a thing. And so I can go ahead and just shoot the moon for this. So that led, of course, to harder admissions, more difficulty getting into the large and selective schools, even the large state institutions, that people don't necessarily think of as, the top academic schools in the country. Ohio State saw a giant surge. It's just because people know of those schools and now they're like, hey, it's kind of competitive to get there. I can take a shot at it. The admissions at smaller and less selective schools, though, actually may have gotten a bit easier. This obviously depends on the school, but I don't want people to think like, oh, every single college is harder to get into in the country now. There's 1,400 colleges out there. And yeah, sure, like it got harder to get into UCLA, but it didn't get harder to get into everywhere. Schools that didn't have, such stringent requirements, in some cases are finding themselves really just wanting warm bodies to get back in the classroom. They're maybe a little bit more keen on throwing money at solid students who might be able to get into an even higher ranked school, but might consider this school as well. So don't panic too much. The short answer for like, if you really want to get into a super selective school is realize that it's kind of a crapshoot these days. And if you really want to go to an Ivy League school, make sure you apply to more than one of them, because one of them's going to say no for arbitrary reasons that you have absolutely no control over. This was true even before. I mean, I had a student with a 1600 SAT score, a 4.9 GPA somehow. Like, I have no idea how they managed to take that many AP classes. President of the student body, captain of the water polo team. Their dad was Egyptian, so they even had like, hey, look, international, access and stuff like that. His dream school was Stanford. He applied to Stanford, just got rejected outright, like not even waitlisted. And he was like, I don't understand. Like, what could I have done better on my application? I was like, literally nothing. You had a perfect application. They just didn't want any more kids from Los Angeles this year. Oh, your name started with a vowel. We took too many of those last year. Ooh, you're left-handed. Yeah, they're just not interested in that right now. You never know. Don't feel too bad for this kid. He got into 3 Ivy League schools, and I think he ended up going to Berkeley on like a full ride or something like that. So like, he's fine, but you just have to realize that it's just kind of weird. They're drawing names out of a hat at the top 50 schools. And so apply to more than one. We're hopefully going to give you guys some legs up on those kind of schools and others, but do keep that in mind and expand your list. Yes, apply to Stanford if you want to go to Stanford, if that's your dream school. If you want to go to UCLA, please apply there. Even if you think you can't get in, you should always chase your dreams, but like, don't only apply to UCLA. There are some other schools on the list. You may be surprised that a school is a really good fit. They're not in the top 40, but they're in the top 200 schools. And hey, look, they gave you a $30,000 scholarship offer because you got a good GPA. So consider broadening that list and think about the different focuses that we're hitting right now. Activities, some argue, is like the second most important thing that people look at. The U category, which includes your essays and your recommendations, has really taken a bump up this year. Some people still think activities is more strongly considered than that by like most colleges, just simply because your activities and extracurriculars are something that you've been doing over the course of 4 years, whereas the essays you just spent, well, hopefully not a day on, but a month or two. And so these two categories continue to be important. I would argue that the essay has been inflated a bit more now because, especially during a weird pandemic, they want to hear your story. We'll talk more about that later. And of course, the SAT, ACT has been demoted a bit, depending on the school, but it can still be a very useful tool, especially if your grades aren't top notch. The SAT, ACT for non-UC CSU schools can be a way to kind of say, hey, look, I know I have a 3.6, but it's not really a 3.6. It's more like a 4.0. So we'll talk about that. I'm going to talk quickly through the first 2 points here and things you can do to kind of help yourself stand out and improve your chances. Grades we already covered. Rigorous coursework, of course, is important, especially in your potential areas of study. I've always pushed back a little bit on the traditional wisdom of take as many AP classes as your school can possibly offer. Yes, you want to take AP classes. Don't quote me on saying, oh, Paul said I don't need to take AP classes. Yes, you absolutely need to take AP classes. But sometimes kids are like, oh, I'm already taking 4 AP classes. They're also offering, AP pottery. I'll probably die because I'll never sleep if I try to also do that. But like, I really have to do it because colleges need you to take every AP. Like, you're gonna major in ceramics. Like, if it's not a subject that's really what you're gonna study, and it would make a difference on your other grades and your other activities and stuff, you don't necessarily have to take every single AP. You really should try to take every AP in the areas that you might study. If you're a STEM person, you're looking at being engineering, they're not going to like it if you didn't try to take some AP science or AP math courses. If you want to be a journalist, you need to be taking AP English and stuff. But do you have to take AP Spanish if you want to be a mechanical engineer? Like, if you're applying to the University of Brazil or something, yeah, maybe, but it's not as critical. Still, though, challenge yourself as much as is reasonable. Also, consider something that I've seen students using to help them stand out recently is what we could call less common class choices. Obviously, this includes things like actual college classes, taking courses at your local community college, or obviously AP is kind of our community or college courses and so forth, but you know, taking things outside of school, beyond the stuff that most of your friends and everybody else is doing. I've had students who are really interested in science, and so they're taking 2 science classes at once. You know, they're taking environmental science and they're taking chemistry at the same time. Now, they're not doing that for all 4 years, but maybe their junior year, an opportunity arose, they had an opening in their schedule, and they could have taken ceramics, but instead they chose to take an additional science course. That doesn't matter as much for somebody who wants to major in history, but you know, if you want to major in science, hey, somehow this kid managed to take 5 science classes during his high school career instead of 4 or instead of 3. That kind of stuff can allow for a little bit of extra standout, and they see that and they're like, oh, okay, that's the way this kid's really serious. He really took every opportunity to learn about this subject as they could. So try to challenge yourself, you know that. Try to attain as high grades as you can, you know that. But think about, you know, other little weird ways that you can go. And I'm not saying you have to take 2 science classes at once. That may not even be possible with your schedule there at West. But you know, keep your eyes open for those kinds of opportunities. For number 2, activities, think always quality over quantity. Starting a club is better than being in 3 clubs. They love to see stuff like initiative. If you did stuff during COVID to kind of, you know, I was sad that soccer was gone, and so I organized sort of a underground soccer. This sounds sort of illicit and dangerous, but like, you know, with me and my buddies started an online soccer. I don't know how you would even do that. Let's change chess or something. I'm on the chess team, and we couldn't have any meets, of course, during the pandemic. So I organized, you know, Torrance area chess championship league that we played in. Oh, if you guys have comments, by the way, I'll try to keep on top of these as much as I can. But if your hand is up, Scott, just throw your chat in there. I think that'll probably be the smoothest way to do it. Somebody asked if business or creative arts, what AP courses would you opt for? It just depends on what they're offering. The counselors may be able to answer that question better than I can. But there might be, I don't know, AP economics or things like that. And that's a great opportunity for outside stuff that merges into like activities. If you were really into performing arts, obviously be in the theater or start your own theater group, or, you know, stuff like that. Start an online storytelling group, and things like that can help show initiative and show leadership and stuff like that. Anything that's not directly through your school. There's a lot of people whose extracurriculars through school were somewhat too very derailed by the pandemic. The people who didn't let that stop them, the people who taught themselves Japanese during the pandemic, or people who, there's one kid, and this is obviously an extreme example, but I remember reading this news article. Oh, I need to plug my thing in here. This news article about this kid who was into coding, but when the pandemic first started, he developed a COVID tracking app that would like keep track of COVID cases across a map like of the US. And it was better than the one that the WHO is using at first. And I just remember reading this article and I was like, this kid is going to get into any college he wants to go to. Like, my God, clearly you need a certain amount of hacking chops to pull something like that off. But that was a kid who's like, I guess I could play Fortnite, or I could design an app to help fight the pandemic. Like, okay, you know, who do you think colleges want? So consider other things outside of the traditional things, especially in this outside the box time, that can be helpful. How does the application reader at the school understand your strategy? How do they know why the student took one course for this reason to target this one need? Well, that's where your essays can come in. And also some of it is not stuff you need to say directly. Part of it is just you showing, like, look, there's 5 science classes on my resume. I wrote my essay about interested in marine biology. You don't have to say that's why you took the 5 science classes for them to get the idea. But we sometimes can sort of create, whether it's obvious or not, sort of a theme to our applications. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Do we have an opportunity to do courses at JC during senior year? How early do we start applying to colleges? Yes, you may have opportunities to take courses at JCs. That is something to talk to your local JCs about. Your counselors may also have recommendations on that. Sometimes if we're already sitting here and you've already started your classes, it might be too late to do it this semester, but maybe in a future semester. And in general, start working on your applications sometime probably over the summer before your senior year. You obviously need to finalize your list before you can fully start submitting, but there are things you can do like brainstorming and working out your essays and compiling your brag sheets and even approaching teachers about recommendations before we get into the September rush period. We will talk about the essay in a moment. So grades, activities, that stuff you guys mostly know. I want to talk a few minutes about the SATs and ACTs. Forgive my cough, by the way. I'm still getting over this lingering cold, which is another good reason we're on Zoom. So for the SATs and ACTs, these obviously used to be a gigantic part of almost every application. In the recent years, more and more schools have been going test optional. You can go all day long about the pros and cons of the SAT. Like, listen, I work in the test prep industry. I know the flaws of the test as well as anybody. They are far from perfect ways of measuring things. Sometimes people who are most vituperantly against the SAT and ACT, sometimes I think make a false assumption that grades are perfect and there's like no way to like hack the grades at all, or that like your grades are always an honest representation of your academic ability. That's clearly not always the case. And so sometimes SATs, ACTs can provide another metric. Regardless, they were important. They still are to some extent. If you're applying to the UCs and the CSUs, you do not have to submit SATs and ACTs. You can't submit them. There's nothing you can do. I've had a student or two try to fit into their essay how they got like a 1400. I kind of think they don't really like that. It's like, listen, we got rid of these for a reason. We don't need you to tell us what your scores are. They're going for a different kind of thing at the UCs and CSUs. Whether you like that or not, that's what they're going for. More than 50% of schools remain test optional or test blind this year. So in fact, this seems low to me. I don't even know very many schools at all that are requiring them. But we're still in a world where most times you don't have to send in your scores. Less than 50% of students submitted scores last year. There is some evidence, and I want to be careful about saying this because I don't want to say that, oh, if you submit a score, you are more likely to get in. I don't think that that's true, but the statistics show that more students were likely to get accepted when they submitted test scores, especially with majors like STEM and business. The math score on the SAT, schools were finding was good, like confirmatory evidence. Like, oh, okay, yeah, you got an A in your like calculus class, but maybe you've been getting help from the teacher every day after school. How good are you at math, really? And the SAT and the ACT, well, as we'll see in a minute, it's a weird way of testing math, but yeah, theoretically, it's something you could score better on if you're better at math. There are some confounding variables here, just by the basic logic of if you took an SAT and you're trying to decide whether to submit it or not, if you got a 1500, you definitely submitted that. If you got an 1100, you may not have submitted that. And so, of course, the people who submitted scores were more likely to get in because they were only submitting really super high scores. So that does defray this a little bit. It doesn't mean like, oh, I have to submit a score. It absolutely does not mean you have to submit a score. Basically, though, it is at least worth figuring out whether you should take and or submit SAT, ACT scores. And I'll talk about that here in just a second. Why would we take the tests? Well, because test optional has led to more competitiveness, as we said, because more students apply. And without scores, the emphasis of your application falls more on the other things. So if you have a 4.5 GPA, if you have founded clubs, if you have amazing teacher recommendations, things like that, then cool. You don't need to submit a score because you already have a super strong application. And unless your scores were even stronger than that, it probably would just, hurt you. So you don't have to submit them in that case. But you might if maybe you don't have perfect grades. Also, all schools, well, virtually all schools these days super score the SAT, which means you can take your best math score from one test and your best verbal score from another and combine them. Even if you never actually got a 1400, if you got a 700 on one sitting on the math and a 700 on the verbal on another setting, you can combine them. Some do this for the ACT. It's a little weirder with the ACT because there's 4 areas. Basically, just check with your school. The downside of super scoring, of course, is that it inflates their scores, which is precisely why colleges do it. So they can say, look, our average SAT score is 1350. We're so smart. But like, actually, that's only after all the super scoring has happened. So most schools consider just the highest scores you submit. There are some that want to see all your scores, but even then, they're generally not taking the average. They're kind of just looking. And if, let's say you got an 1100 on your first time because it didn't go that well. Well, I mean, 1100 is still well above average. It's still a very good score. But you're hoping for something higher. They're not really going to worry about that. If you got a 1300 on your second one, they're going to be like, oh, they were just warming up. 1300 is really the score. If you took the test 6 times to get a 1300, that might not look as good. So depends on the counselor you ask. I think taking each test twice, if you're going to take both, is probably more than enough. The 3rd and 4th time, like, how much better are you going to do if you prepped properly? I have heard other people say 3 is fine. Some schools literally do not care how many times you take it, but just in general, if you prep properly, you shouldn't have to take it that many times. Somebody asked, how early should you prep for the SATs? It depends on when you're going to take it. I'll get to this in a minute, but typically recommend for most years when there's not a pandemic going on, spring of junior year is usually really good, which means that you might want to start preparing however you're going to do that, maybe like 2 months beforehand, maybe a little bit earlier if you think you have a long way to go, maybe not as early if you think you're mostly okay, but I'll get into that in just a second. Also, you can cancel your ACT scores after you get them. And you wouldn't necessarily even need to. You can just not submit them or only submit your highest ones. But if you do really badly on the ACT, you can literally just erase your scores from the earth. There's directions about how to do that on their website. So, in that sense, other than it being a waste of time, what's the downside there? SAT only can be canceled for like 5 days after your test. But really, it's more about submitting them than it is about taking them. And I usually say, like, these days, it can't hurt. You can also do something that is called differential score reporting. This is a fancy word for saying you can send your score to some schools, but not others. My niece just started her freshman year at a school in Pennsylvania. And when she was applying, she did pretty well on her SAT, got like a 1250. But her grades were like really, really strong. And some of the schools she was applying to, 1250 was above their median. And so that looked good for them. And they wanted to see that score. And that helped them offer her, scholarships and stuff. There was one school she applied to that was like a 30% acceptance rate school. And they actually directly contacted her and they say, hey, can you resubmit your application, but without your SAT scores? She was like, oh, okay. I guess they were not quite in the median of their particular school scores. And so she just took her test scores back off that application, resubmitted it, and then they offered her a $30,000 a year scholarship based on her grades and other stuff. So I'm not saying that they're going to contact you and tell you to do that, but for some schools, you might use your scores and for others, you might not. Basically, take practice tests to see where you might be at, and then decide whether or not you're going to take the SAT or ACT, and then send it if you are at or above the median. If you're trying to apply to Harvard and their median ACT score is a 34 or 35 and you got a 31, that's a fantastic score, but it isn't really going to help you to submit it to Harvard. Well, unless you have a really low GPA, in which case that would help your case, but probably not enough to actually get in. Just try to decide whether it's right for you. If you're only applying to Cal States and UCs, you don't need to take the SAT, ACT, it'd be a waste of time. There might be scholarships out there that want to see them, but unless there's a reason to do so, don't take the test. If you are applying to any of the other 1,360 schools out there that are test optional or whatever, think about whether you might want to take the tests or not and decide to send them in or not. The ACT is the fast but simple test. The SAT is the slow but tricky test. You actually have to go way faster on the ACT. There's 215 questions in 3 hours versus 154 questions in 5 more minutes. So wait, you have to do 60 more questions in 5 fewer minutes on the ACT? Yeah, it's a way faster test, but it's less of a deep thinking kind of test. There's things that are a little bit more straightforward and they're kind of handing you the answers a little bit more quickly than on the SAT. So that depends on your learning style. Also, how much you like math may factor in. For students who absolutely love math, the SAT is super helpful because it's half math. Half your score is based on math. Only a quarter of your score on the ACT is based on math. There is a science section, but it's not actually science at all. It's just a graph reading contest. It's much easier once you figure out how to do it. Many students try both tests because colleges will just use whichever one you score higher on. So I often would just say, take your PSAT, if there's a pre-ACT offered at school, take that, or, come to one of our practice tests. This one is our current list of like when we're doing a bunch of free tests. There's actually one this weekend on Sunday. So if you're really champing at the bit, I believe is actually the phrase, to get an ACT practice test or an SAT, you can just go to our website, PGHS Prep RSVP, and register for one. There's another one in December and so forth. And then just look at what your scores are and compare them to your grades. Be like, oh, this isn't going to help. Or, oh my gosh, this would definitely help. People are asking about the timetable. So let me go to that next. Typically, junior year spring is the best time to take these SATs and ACTs. I traditionally have recommended strongly the March SAT, and I continue to do so. That's also one of the tests where you can get your actual score report back with the actual questions and answers. If you're looking at the ACT, February and April are always good dates of junior year. I've been hearing some people say that taking the December ACT so that you can see how things are going kind of early and then cancel your score if you don't like it is a way that you can go. I don't have a particular problem with that. I wouldn't say you have to take the December ACT if you're not ready to start prepping for your juniors, like, in October. But it is something that you could consider just to kind of get one under your belt. At least maybe try to take a practice test beyond your just PSAT in the fall, just to kind of see where you're at. So that's typically what I recommend. Try to get these done if you can by the end of junior year. Obviously, current seniors, there were so many test cancellations that it's okay if you're still doing it now. But for freshmen and sophomores and even juniors, hopefully the pandemic won't be as much of a cancellation factor as it has been. And so that's typically a good timetable. Freshman and sophomore year, if you guys are having an opportunity to take the PSAT, you should do that. But remember, the PSAT it doesn't even count for anything until you're a junior. And even as a junior, it's just for like national merit and practice. And so you should definitely do it. But some people are like, oh my gosh, I have to prep excessively for the PSAT because I got to get into college. No colleges are going to look directly at your PSAT scores. They care about your SAT scores. The PSAT is just a warm up for that. So freshman, sophomore year, focus on other things. Junior year, start thinking about the SAT, ACT, whether you're going to take it or not. Make a plan for maybe doing that in the spring or even the winter of your junior year, and certainly take PSATs all the way along. The SAT is also something that you can improve on. Like, I know it's a big, scary test, but like, there's a whole bunch of hacks and crazy tricks you can do to like just get way better at this test. This example is a funny one. So this is kind of a harder math question from the test. And it's, it's algebra 2, division of polynomials. You can do this with the synthetic division as well. But if you're like, what are all those words you just said? I don't remember any of this. You can also just do this trick on the SAT where you just like make up a number. And you can be like, oh, X is 1. Okay, well, how do you know X is 1, Paul? How do you know it isn't? Oh, it can be anything I want. I want to use 17. Why do you like pain so much? But you could use literally any number and well, not -3, because then a black hole would open up in the denominator, and not doing that again. But make up any number you want. And then you ask yourself, well, what would this even be equal to if X was 1? So 5 minus 2 over 1 plus 3, that's going to be 3/4. So step 1, make up a number. Step 2, figure out what this would be with that number. And then all you have to do is take these guys and plug them in, and whichever one comes out to be 3/4 is your answer. This one's not. This is 3/3. This one's going to be 5 minus just a little bit of stuff, like some chump change. That's going to be like 4 and something, 4 1/3. That's nowhere near 3/4. So that isn't it. This is going to be the same problem. 5 minus a little bit of stuff is going to be 4 1/2. This one, though, 5 minus 17/4. Well, 17/4 is the same as 4 1/4. Because 4 goes into 17 4 times with 1 left over. 5 minus 4 1/4 equals 3/4. Wait, I just got this right. I have no idea how to do this math, but that doesn't matter. like, as they famously say, this makes the test seem like more disgusting, but there's a reason. Maybe it's okay in a minute. The SAT only really tests your ability to get SAT questions right. Sure, being good at math or reading is like helpful, but if you got the question right, they don't really care whether you did the math or you did some hack. And obviously that seems a little weird, but do remember the point of the SAT and the ACT is to not be like your grades. It's to be this other thing. If you have a 2.8 in high school, Steve Jobs had a 2.8 in high school, but you'd probably want to admit him to your college because it's a lot of donation money. Well, how do you tell though? Because some people with a 2.8 like aren't Steve Jobs. Well, you could give them this test and then they figure out, even if they don't know the formula, they figure out some clever way to do it. Yeah, their colleges are okay with clever people too, in addition to people who are very good at math. So it's a silly test. It's very easy to improve on. There's lots of hacks and tricks and whatnot you can learn. So even if you're like, oh, right now I feel intimidated by the SAT, ACT, my grades are pretty good, I think I'll just not take it. Could be worth an exploration into, a practice test or a quick, like we do these free seminars where it's like a bunch of tricks like this, where here's how to get better at it. You might find that you're like, oh, that actually isn't so bad. Maybe I could take that. Maybe that could give me one more leg up. Is the PSAT offered for juniors? Yes, as Tanya responded, it is. This year will be for juniors this year. Is that right? Okay. Sometimes they'll even be able to offer it for other grades, but the fact that they can even pull a PSAT off this year during a pandemic is awesome. So take advantage of that, you juniors. That's a really great way to just kind of see how things go. Do remember that the curve on the PSAT is quite a bit easier than it is on the SAT, though. Even though the test is just as difficult, well, almost. You do got to take that score with a little bit of a grain of salt. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to touch on here was the essays. I have a whole presentation on this. If you're interested, I can send you the video of it. I'll also be doing one of these probably later in the fall here. But the short answer to this is when you're writing your essays, whether it's for the UCs or you have to write 4 shorter essays called personal insight questions, or whether it is a longer essay for the Common App, possibly with supplements, basically your job is to stand out. And your opponent, well, not your opponent, your sage here, who's sitting in some office with a stack of papers on his desk reading these, has read a billion of these. And like most of them are so bad. Your job is to try to stand out from the crowd. And I'll go into a lot more detail on this in another presentation here. But basically, there's sort of 3 ways to do that. One way addresses their, if I get that kid who's going to make $1 million and start the next Facebook or something, I can finally get that raise. One way to approach this is to try to come up with something that you've done that's like kind of impressive. I started this club. I, wrote a book. I fundraised, $5,000 for charity. Basically something that most people haven't done. I had one student who got baseball equipment donated for underprivileged players. And they got so much that they filled a shipping container and got the Dodgers to fund having that shipping container sent to the Dominican Republic, where the student got to go and like deliver this baseball equipment. I was like, damn, like most people haven't done that. That's pretty impressive. So think about if you've done anything in that realm. Now, not everybody has, so that's only one approach that you can take. Being different, what makes you different from your friends? This can be something like, oh, I moved here from a different state or a different country, or I've only got one arm, or I am a one-eyed albino lumberjack from Wyoming, or I'm Jewish, or whatever it is. With all of these, though, it's not enough just to say, I am a one-eyed albino lumberjack from Wyoming. Like, okay, well, that's certainly different than most of the rest of our candidates. We could put you on the cover of our brochure. But that is kind of a shallow way to look at it, because ultimately, like, why does that make you a better college student? And that's something that you want to be thinking about too. These essays usually come down to not only what makes you different, but what perspective has that given you? So think about what makes you different from your friends, what not everybody around you can say, And then try to think about what that's taught you about life, about yourself, about maybe your career. Sometimes people find a weird way to like, connect what's different about them into what they want to do for a living and so forth. And so that's another approach you can take. The third approach is to be interesting. Basically, like, what essay haven't they seen before? These are like the viral ones and the most extreme cases where it's about something just super crazy. I do all my best philosophical thinking on the toilet, or my armpits. I have a glandular sweating problem and my armpits are like carrying around 2 mops and headlocks, or just like a funny or sad or touching essay. You hear about the tragedy essay all the time, and just writing a straight up, woe is me, I experienced a tragedy, you should let me in for that reason, that isn't going to work. It either needs to be like a really touching story, in which case they're getting like teared up and they're like, oh, what an interesting thing to read, or my tragedy of losing my dad or whatever it is has given me a really unique perspective, and that's why I want to get into grief counseling or something like that. Okay, cool. Like, I could see that being something that makes you different. You can't just write like a hardship essay and expect the pity to get you in. You need to be exploring what's interesting or what's different and what realizations that you have learned from it. Some things to be careful of. You don't have to write what's already been said elsewhere on your application. Sure, you can if there's a story there about how you became student body president. But if there isn't really a story and you're just student body president, and frankly, it's cool, but it's not that interesting, isn't it kind of more baller just to be the student body president on your activities list, and then you don't even have to write your essay about it? So don't feel like you have to write about that one flagship achievement. I always counsel people to not worry that much about the questions, about the prompts, and don't just like answer them and that's it. You do want to be thinking of a story, and I would let your ideas guide before you try to pair them to a prompt. That being said, you can't go so far off topic that it doesn't have anything to do with the prompt. The UCs especially don't like it when you do that. So don't ignore the prompt, but don't let it stultify your ideas. Focus on the ideas you actually want to write about, and then pair it to the prompt afterwards. Don't write about somebody else unless that's the prompt. But either way, it should really be about you. Sometimes I'll tell stories about people who wrote about their uncle that made a big impact on them. But if you read carefully, the essay is actually about them and what they did, even if another character plays a role. Be careful of what we call smoke words. One of the grand, essay poombas out there who has the best-selling book about like what you should write these about, coined the phrase smoke words, which I think is a great way of describing these. My commitment and passion for goals. My work ethic is strong and I'm dedicated to excellence. Like, oh, just cover my head with a pillow. Like, no, like, you have to give specifics in these. They hate vague stuff. They hate obvious stuff. They love description or uniqueness. When I moved, I had trouble fitting in and I just wanted to be a part of the group and stuff. Okay. My Steve Madden boots coated in cow pies was an essay about this girl who moved from like Manhattan to Idaho, I think, and lived on a farm. Like, this is just such a more interesting way to show that you didn't fit in than to say like, oh, I wanted to fit in, but I missed all my friends. Like, lame, anybody can say that. Be careful of these smoke words. Kids think they sound impressive, like smoke is supposed to show that there's a fire, but at the end of the day, it doesn't cook my meat. So try to be specific instead of lame and vague. Overly cliche topics like my sports, my mental illness or tragedy, my trip, my bland activity that everyone kind of really does. I take a less hard stance on these. There are some essay coaches out there that say like, do not ever write a sports essay. I'm not that harsh because like, there can be a good sports essay still. There's new sports movies every year, even though that genre has been done to death. But you just got to realize that everybody's got a soccer essay and yours has to like do something that none of the other ones are doing. And that's really hard. So make sure that it's not just an essay about how you're good at soccer, like how playing different positions in volleyball has taught me about the ways that different people interact with each other and told me that I want to get into psychology. Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that. But that isn't really about volleyball then, is it? It's about something else. And so keep these common ones in mind and just be very careful if you're choosing to set off down one of those paths. And of course, a gimmick that isn't you, give them what they want, but not at the expense of who you are. Like, sometimes I'll tell this really funny essay that we have about this kid who created basically like a gladiator arena in their basement, and all the neighborhood kids would come over, and it was like Pleasure Island from Pinocchio, except for with more hitting each other with hockey sticks. And it's this insane essay, and it's wacky, and it's super funny. But kids read it and they're like, oh my gosh, that essay was so funny. Like, should I write a funny essay? And I'm like, well, it depends. Are you funny? Because if you're not, oh, for the love of God, please do not try to write a funny essay. It'll be, oh, so horrible for everyone involved. So make sure that it's you. Like, at the end of the day, this is about who you are. And yeah, I know that's really generic, lame advice, because like, well, thanks, Paul, that doesn't help. But think about that in terms of what you're crafting your essay towards. Should you write about COVID? Probably not, unless it's like something that no one else would write about COVID, like how COVID taught me I wanted to be an epidemiologist, or how COVID made me teach myself Japanese. Don't just be like, COVID was hard and I got really depressed and my grades dropped. Yeah, you and everybody else. And I don't mean to sound insensitive, but like, anything that everybody can write about, don't write about that, because it does the opposite of helping you stand out. Basically, make a list, then make your plan. I recommend doing the UC 4 essays first. That way you can narrow down, maybe you came up with 8 or 10 possible ideas, you narrowed it down to your favorite 4, you matched those to UC prompts, and then you took the best one, or sometimes you have 2 of them that are kind of thematically related, and you connected those and made that your Common App longer essay. Then you can use the unused UCs for your supplements and scholarship essays. And of course, get help with all this, like whether it's with a counselor, a parent, or me, or somebody, like show somebody else your essay ideas before you spend a lot of time writing them. You do not want to have an idea that you spend all this time polishing and they're like, oh, it's a lame sports travel essay. Yeah, you shouldn't even do this idea. You're like, I spent 10 hours. Get some feedback before you even bother drafting. That'll save you a lot of headache. You can use this essay application brainstorm sheet if you like. I promise, if you sit down and actually, answer all these questions, you don't have to write them all out, but like, think about them for a second, make a voice recording note in your phone or something about the answer to what you would say. You'll have a couple possible ideas by the time you get to the end of this page. So this might be a reason to download the handout that was at the top of the chat. Have your student just like answer these questions if they're struggling to come up with ideas. Okay, finally, guys, what else can I do? Is there anything else besides hitting those 4 quadrants as hard as I can to help myself stand out? Yeah, I have a few other things. Early action and early decision. I've always been fairly ambivalent about these. I've usually said, like, unless you're really sure that a school is like a top choice, it's not imperative to go early decision, early action. The pandemic did see a big jump in the acceptance percentage for early decision and early action, outpacing regular decisions, in some cases by like a lot. It does depend on the school though. There were some schools where it doesn't really make a big difference. But I looked at like the stats for about like 30 or 40 schools, mostly private colleges. And I don't think there was any school where you were more likely to get in with regular decision. Now, I don't want to say this hard and fast because maybe there is a school that I haven't heard about, but the general trend is that if you're like pretty solid on a school, it'll probably slightly help your percentage of getting in by going some version of early action, early decision. Be careful about navigating this. Some of these decisions are restrictive and you have to then go to the school, and don't do that if you don't really want to go to the school. So just still be careful. And I still think it's fine to just apply everywhere regular. But whereas I used to say, don't really worry that much about early action, early decision, looking at the numbers, I'm starting to be a little more convinced that like, if you do have a favorite school, it could only probably help you a little bit about getting in to think about maybe doing an early action or early decision. Part of that's because of demonstrated interest, which is the idea that colleges like you more when you really like them. You definitely don't want to say, I can't wait to major in economics and be a Trojan and send that to UCLA, where they are not Trojans, they're the opposite of Trojans, and maybe they don't have an economics major. They probably do at UCLA. But like, make sure that colleges know that you actually want to go there. That's where the like why Duke or why Stanford or why Northwestern, where I went, essays really kind of help you. They want to see that, and you don't have to just like kiss their butt by sending them lots of letters, Just simply visiting the college, being on record that you went to go see it, or, sending the admissions counselor an email, under the guise of asking some question, but now there's a paper trail that you're interested enough to contact them. Just little ways of showing that you care. And of course, applying their early decision is a huge show that you care about the school. That's one of the main reasons that I think the admissions are higher, is because they're like, oh, these people who applied early, they really want to go here. If we accept them, they'll come here. And then we don't have to worry about like not getting enough students and so forth, because we need money. There are X factors that are involved. This is not true of every school, but if you're an underrepresented group, schools don't mind that. Sometimes students with hardships, again, not that your cat died, but so you had to move cities or something because you lost a parent or whatever, like, sometimes that stuff can help. But of course, it's not just about the pity. On the opposite end of the spectrum, sometimes schools like full pay students who, have money and can pay. I don't know. It's a weird, you never know what the secret motivations are. Some schools want to be more diverse. Some schools want more money. I don't know that you can really manipulate these at all. Like, just who are you? Present who you are honestly. And if a school wants that, then they'll take it. If not, special anecdotal references from your teacher. This is a note I heard the other day in a conference I thought was a cool idea. When you're asking your teachers for references, they get asked a billion times by a billion people, and they often will have you fill out some form. If you can be specific about, like, reminding them who you are, and instead of saying, oh, Cynthia is great at math, if they're like, Cynthia's approach of defending Fermat's last theorem in front of the class was a fascinating approach, and she was so resilient with the way that she defended her technique. Those are always going to stand out a little bit more. You can't make your teachers do certain things, but if you can, like, remind them, or select teachers where you have done things that are a little bit more unique, a little bit more standout. Some kind of theme to your app. Again, you're not going to like package it in a pink colored ribbon and say, oh, hey, this is the theme of my app, but like certain things fit together. I had a student who had moved a lot. Him and his family had moved around the country, and he'd lived in a bunch of different houses, and that made him different, because not every kid can say that. But he, in his essay, reflected on how each of these houses kind of fit the geographic realm that it was from. They lived in kind of like a Cape Cod beach style, like East Coast fishing house when they were in Connecticut. And then when they lived in Texas, they lived in this like ranch house with all this acreage, although it was really cheap. And then when he got to California, and he lived in, I think, like the Valley or something, and he had kind of a, desert style house. He made him realize he really liked architecture, like seeing how these different houses fit into different kinds of places. And his resume supported that. He'd taken all these classes, he'd gone to an architecture conference, and you got this idea that, like, dang, this kid is like the traveling architect. That's the theme of their app. What a baller. Not every kid has that. Most kids don't have that. But we want to be thinking about opportunities to show them that there's some kind of theme. I am a math person. I'm a journalist. I am a sports psychologist. I'm a whatever. And sometimes your essays may balance out your activities and show that kind of thing. Finally, and I almost want to throw up even talking about this, but like, admissions are an arms race, and there's always like the next new thing that really competitive people are like doing. I have heard of this thing called the Independent Research Project, where kids are like during their junior year or something like that, doing their own like independent, I'm going to research pollution in the South Bay because I'm interested in like, marine biology and environmental science, but also like I want something really baller to put on my application. And so I'm going to do this research project and like submit it to someplace and try to like win an award. It's really just seems like kind of overkill. But if you're like, I really got to do something to get into Yale because I just don't have the numbers otherwise, be looking for opportunities to go above and beyond and do things that other people aren't doing. And you should never do something that doesn't interest you, otherwise it just feels phony. But like, I loved writing creatively in high school, and so I wrote a couple of plays. One of them got produced semi-professionally. That probably helped Northwestern take me even with my very mediocre high school GPA. I didn't do that to get into college. I did that because I loved it. But if there's something that can, fulfill both purposes, that's something to think about. Okay, we are running out of time. And so the rest of this stuff is just some stuff about we do. We have some consulting for essays and SAT, ACT classes, blah, 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 blah. This is not some sales pitchy thing. But I am Paul Jury and we are PJ Test Prep. I want to open this up to questions. And I have posted a link to the slides. It just got disconnected. Oh, it's here again. I'll post it on our website. Here's the direct link. But I want to open this up to questions. I'll scroll back through to see if I missed any. Somebody said admissions for UC and CSU were devastating last year, especially for impacted majors. For those who are truly undecided, it will hinder their chances if they select undeclared. Maybe. I think that does depend a little on the school, and maybe that was unanimously true for UCs and CSUs. If you know what you want to major in, that can help. I always worry a little bit about declaring a major that you don't really even want to study, especially if it's not reflected on your app, because it may come off as ingenuine. But if you do know that the stats are better for a particular major at a particular school, and you're on the borderline anyway, yeah, sometimes declaring a major can make things a little bit easier. Basically, guys, just think of who you are and what is the overall story that you can present with your application across all of these categories. There is going to be a school for you. It may not be the school you thought it was, but that's why we apply to a bunch of places. You kind of let them decide. Remember that, couple target schools, couple reach schools, couple safety schools. You'll find your place. I found mine. Most of my students eventually find theirs. Just be open to looking at yourself a little bit from the outside and, get help with all of this. Okay, questions, guys. Is there anything else I can assist with? Which 10 are the best universities for information technology, cybersecurity in California? I got one word for you: Google. That is not something I know off the top of my head, but that is something you could definitely research. And that's a good way to start any college list. Is I'm interested in this program. Who's got strong programs in it? Let me start there. Combine those with some of the other things that you're looking for. Counselors, I want to thank you again so much for having me. I'll stick around afterwards to answer some other questions if anybody's got any, but I don't want to keep you guys. I know we have other responsibilities and everything. So thank you guys. Anything to add, counselors? Anything I should also cover?
I was just going to add really quick. I'm Mrs. Garcia, counselor for last names A through FE. And we did just hire our new college and career coordinator. For those of you probably know Miss Torres, who has been our college and career coordinator for the past 5 or 6 years, but she's moved on to a different school as a school counselor. And so we're super excited because Mitzi Stover is our new college and career coordinator who actually started this week. So I don't know if she is, I think she's still online, but I just wanted to introduce her and also let the parents know, because I know there's a lot of questions about the PSAT and the pre-ACT. We are hosting our college and career day this year. So the juniors will be taking the PSAT, the sophomores will be doing the pre-ACT, and then there's going to be activities for seniors and freshmen that are college and career focused. More information will be coming very soon. We are just trying to finalize what each grade level will be doing, and then we'll be sharing that with students and parents. Okay.
Thank you, guys. And please utilize your genius and amazing counselors. This is what they do. They can help point you guys in the directions. In many cases, they know more about California schools that are strong in certain things than I do. So please, this is a great resource you guys have available. I know all these folks and they are fantastic. And so, that's another way to get help. But of course, welcome to reach out to me. If there's anything else I can help with, I'm always happy to consult with you guys. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. I'll stick around for more questions, but Tiffany, Leanne, Tanya, everybody else, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Paul. We really appreciate you being here today.
I'm happy to be here always. Thank you, guys.
Hi, Paul. I put a quick question in there about how your program works. And is it a long-term program or short-term to help students with test prep and the application process? If you could just talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Yes, I have. We do all of that. So our website, pjtestprep.com, is a good place to start. For our SAT, ACT classes, we have both shorter and longer classes, as well as private tutoring that can be whatever you need it to be. Right now, our schedule only has through the end of this year. But for instance, this is what the full course for the December SAT or for the December ACT looks like. We often will have just 2-week-long crash courses that are only $195, so that's a good way to get a quick turn, especially for people who are like trying to do a little bit for the PSAT, but they know it doesn't really matter that much, so they're not going to try to invest too much in it. That can be a way to go. So that's one way that we could help. That trick about doing the math questions, like that's the tip of the iceberg. There's so much you can learn about getting way better at the SAT. We have essay classes and essay consulting. We have a program where you basically get all the way through all of your UCs and your Common App essays for like a set price, or you can just do kind of some a la carte consulting. So we help in that realm as well. And for anybody who's just like stinking at pre-calculus right now, or algebra 2 or chemistry, I have a team of really, really great tutors who work with me and help kids straighten out in that realm. So we don't have a package deal for everything all together because it's such a individualized process that different people need different things. But our website, pjtestprep.com, lays out a lot of that, and you can just contact me as well if there's something specific we can help you guys with. We pretty much do it all at this point.
Great. Thanks so much for your time. It was very informative. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Happy to help, guys. Thank you for being here. Okay, well, you are welcome, everybody. And also, feel free to email me. I'll throw my information's on the chat there, but I'm at paul@pjtestprep.com. You can always just follow up, or my number is here as well. Make sure I didn't typo it. But contact me if you guys have any questions. I'm always happy to just chat with you on the phone about, what your process should be, and it'll be really easy.
Hi, Paul. I was the one that that sent you a message about the college essay.
Yeah. Yes.
My daughter is a senior, and obviously right now I'm trying to get her essay together.
Yeah.
My ex's mother actually paid $7,500 for a lady to kind of help us do this.
$7,500. Oh my God. I've never charged that much. I would have to go to your house and cook you meals.
Yeah, I know. And then she was also talking about doing that that whole project that you were talking about, for research and stuff. So
okay.
Yeah, $7,500 for 2 months of work.
Well, but, I would hope that they would also include a lot of admissions consulting stuff in that package as well. But yeah, writing these essays can be such a challenging process because it's so hard for students to, write about themselves and, in this way that is not braggy, but it is braggy. It's it's a mess. And so I have a presentation that I give on this that goes a lot deeper on the approaches thing. I think we've done our last public one for the fall, but I have a video of it that I can send you. It's like a 45-minute just YouTube that you can watch about, here are some ideas to get started. We end up in the same place with this application essay brainstorm sheet. But we tell stories in it and, talk about ways to kind of jumpstart your imagination and just be thinking about who you're writing for with these things, which is always key with these. Keep that person in mind, but then think about who you are as well and how we can convey both. So email me if any of you guys want that video. Obviously I'll try to contact the counselors the next time we're going to do a free one. But on our website, there's also a page that I think I mentioned earlier, but free tests and seminars, where you can go to see what we're doing that's free coming up. On Sunday, we have an SAT, ACT test, as well as a free presentation, doing another one of those on the 12th. We just did our last essay Zoom for the fall, but we may do something else again that we'll add. So let us know if we can send any of that stuff. And of course, if you've got a specific situation, just call me or email me and I'll see if I can help.
Yeah, that'd be great, because she's a cancer survivor, and so people have been telling her, don't make it too personal. So we're kind of at a loss to incorporate it
Yeah, I think you could include that. And I think that what they're saying about not making it too personal is don't just make it like, woe is me, here's my sad story, you should let me in because like I had hard things happen. That isn't ultimately what they care about. They care about what she learned from it, how it has shown her resilience. But something like that inevitably shows a great deal of resilience. And so, you know, why wouldn't you include something like that? You just got to find the right way to kind of execute it.
I'll definitely be emailing you, and thank you for your time.
Of course, of course. Okay. Any
Thank you.
other questions? Yeah.
When you get a chance, maybe just email us the recording to the session and then we'll go ahead and post it on the website. But I think we're good.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and
Thank
if anybody
you.
else has questions, just email them or call me and we will post this. It'll probably be done processing in the next 15, 20 minutes. I'll send it over to you guys. Thank you guys so much again. And everybody, good luck with this crazy, crazy process. It gets easier. Thank you, everybody. Talk soon.